So I wanted to go here. Have you been following anything that's going on in New Mexico?
No, let me see. What happened?
All right, so check this out. Man shot as New Mexico protesters try to remove Spanish conquistador statue. So police in Albuquerque have named a member of the militia group who was arrested after a man was shot in New Mexico City, on Monday night as protesters tried to tear down a bronze statue of a Spanish conquistador outside the city museum. Authorities later announced the statue would be removed until the next steps could be determined. So a group of men. So basically what happened was there was this militia group. Now, I have an email. One of the regular listeners on this show was there, and he sent me this email where he's like, here's what actually went down. And he also sent me this article to accompany it. So I want to read his email. I'm not going to say his name because I don't know if he wants to be identified. But here's what he sent me. He sent me this article, and then he goes, so after getting the statue of Oñate, who is Don Juan Oñate, was a brutal Spanish conquistador who left rivers of blood across the state of New Mexico. Pulled down just north of here. So just north of Albuquerque, they got a statue pulled down. Protesters went to Albuquerque to get another. That's when the right-wing militia and self-appointed civil guards showed up to menace and intimidate people. Other right-wing nuts were in the crowd trying to start fights. The shooter first threw a 100-pound girl to the ground from behind, and the article talks about that, where he was this person was throwing girls to the ground before getting their gun out. He got hit in the head with a skateboard and then pulled a gun. The victim was shot as he tried to tackle the right-wing militia guy to get the gun away. The militia boys ran over and formed a circle around him to protect him. The cops then came in to arrest the militia and the shooter, but they were there the whole time. They let this happen.
Yes.
And here's what this account says, that this person who was there, they referred to the militia as armed friendlies on police radio. And then they began shooting tear gas and rubber bullets at the protesters. And this person saying it's much more fucked up than these articles let on. Then he also adds, I almost forgot the shooter is a county sheriff's son. That's who he's calling.
There you go.
The so again, systemic racism.
Yes.
Is this something that can be reformed? No.
Right.
This is not reformable.
Yes.
This is a systemic disease.
Yes.
This right-wing militia, deemed as a friend of the cops, was shooting protesters, peaceful protesters. They were shooting them. And then the cops said, step in after that's over. And I know there's I believe there's a GoFundMe to help the guy who was shot too. That's out there. You can find that. So, this is not a reformable thing.
No.
You got it. And that's why when people are just like, well, defund just sounds a little scary. It just sounds scary. We got to pick something else. Like, no, this isn't reformable. This is not, you can't reform this. You have to defund, demilitarize, abolish, and then reinvent. And I realize that's too long to chant. We can't chant. That's too long.
It's too much. I know. It won't fit on the time.
That's just too. But and people who can't fathom that, I'm like, well, can you fathom continuing this? No. Can you fathom that? Can you fathom continuing this brutal, systemically racist killing machine? Is that fathomable? I'd say no.
No, you're right.
We got to do something different because it can't possibly be worse than what we have now.
Well, I guess it could always get worse. That's the scariest thing. Because you think
but if you reinvent it, it's like Gareth said something like this on the show yesterday, where it's like if we truly reinvent just how law enforcement plays a role in our lives, and it had community oversight and community involvement, and it was very heavily scrutinized, and the communities were actually involved. It'd be really hard, to come up with something worse. Like it would take effort, true effort, to come up with something worse.
Because you have to also stop the bullshit game about how a few bad apples as well. Because
it's a bullshit argument.
Yeah,
it makes no sense.
And that's another way of just excusing the broken system. Oh, there's only a few bad apples. Well, if those.
And they always forget the spoils the bunch part too, by the way.
Right.
Whenever people say the few bad apples, that phrase finishes spoils the bunch. Not to mention, when you have a systemic disease, which is what this is, saying, well, it's just a couple bad apples. That's the equivalent of, say we have an E. coli outbreak and you take a shred of lettuce and be like, this one's okay.
Right.
No one does that.
Exactly.
Nobody does that. So
Exactly.
it makes 0 sense. It's a non-starter.
Yes.
Like it's
If that's the case, if it's a few bad apples, then why don't all the good apples get rid of the bad apples immediately when they see the
because
bad?
the opposite
Right.
happened.
That's
When
what
there's
happened.
someone
It's the
because of the
truth.
system, when someone actually does go in there with good intentions, which I'm sure that happens from
Yeah.
time to time, they get weeded out.
Yes.
They get weeded out. I mean,
They
I've
get
had
they get ostracized by their peer.
yeah.
In fact, Frank Serpico, who they made that movie about, well, he wrote a book. He was the whistleblower in, I think it was the 70s, where he's a cop. He was a cop. He blew the whistle on the corruption that was going on systemically in the New York City Police Department, where they were shaking down drug dealers. They were involved in organized crime. They were giving drug dealers escorts all over town, the ones who were paying them off. They were the entire department was corrupt. And this man, Frank Serpico, he came forward. They tried to kill him. They wouldn't. He was on a call that he almost lost his life. They didn't send him back. I mean, there's like a whole story, and he still writes about it. And he recently wrote an article saying that he still gets vilified by the cops. So whenever they'll still call him names, he'll get nasty emails, they'll boo him, I mean, if he is, but he was the one that blew the whistle, on the entire department of corruption. He would be a hero if it wasn't a corrupt system. They would lionize him, not vilify him
Said
to
the
this day.
opposite.
Exactly. And he was also, the article I read that he wrote, he was talking about this incredible use of deadly force now that is now the first thing they go to. And he wrote about one of, during the back in the day or whatever, when he was on the beat, how it was, at least that wasn't the first thing they went to. Like, they used to, he told the story about a cop who was attacked by a knife, but obviously the guy was out of his mind, and he didn't murder him. They subdued him, and he was stabbed in the process, one of the cops, but they still didn't murder him at the time. But it's
amazing that, they always, they always manage to apprehend certain
right,
people.
exactly.
Dylan Roof
Yes.
shot 9 people in a black church.
Yep.
And they took him out for Burger King.
Yeah, they went
before
to
taking him to jail.
That's right.
I mean, they're.
Oh my God, yeah.
And there was that. I mean, recently there was a white guy with an axe or something like that in North Hollywood. They were able to apprehend that guy.
Right.
They were able to. I mean, it's very, very.
Then they go into, I remember reading about this woman, and she was a black woman, an older black woman, and she had a mental problem. They just bust in the door and they shoot her dead. So what is that shit? Anyway, anybody who calls themselves a patriot, who calls themselves an American patriot, needs to they should understand. Otherwise, they're not patriots. That's the cops are there to bring you to your day in court. They're not the execution squad. They're not there to administer justice. They're demanding that we open up the government during a pandemic. They're
the ones instigating the violence.
Yes.
The cops are instigating the violence. I mean, it's just every single protest I've been to. It's either, if it's been completely peaceful, it's because the cops never showed up.
Yeah.
And whenever things got dicey, it's because the cops showed up.
Right.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and